Today on Make It Matt, we are making this 4-foot by 8-foot workbench. Here is a little sneak preview of what it's going to look like when it's all assembled and painted. To get there, we're going to start with putting all the screws in the box so we could spray paint them and get them drying before it's time for assembly. We're also going to be painting the brackets that we're going to use to hold the four corners of the workbench. We're mainly using brackets for ease of assembly, but also for a cool contrasted look when we're painting it. The next step is to cut all the legs and the supports for the top and the lower shelf. So we're going to get all those cut to length for the dimensions of our workbench and give it a nice quick sand. Nothing big, but just to get all the sharp edges or any splinters off of it, so we'll be ready to take the paint. Now we finally get to start assembling this. This is a lot of repetition because we're taking all these 2x4 pieces we cut for the frame of the workbench. We're putting them in these Simpson strong tie brackets and screwing them together. Each one of these brackets has multiple holes, I think 4 or 5 screws per 2x4, but the end result is a nice strong connection, and it held a really nice right angle. I checked it against some of the right angle tools I had. Nothing is precision by any means, but I was happy with how easily it held a good 90 degrees. And here you see the same thing, just from a different angle. This little table I'm working on was what I was using for my workbench, but decided it was too small, and that's why I'm upgrading with this 4x8 workbench now. So I'm converting to use this piece of plywood as my work surface now to try to hold everything as flat as possible while assembling. Okay, now I've flipped the frame over and I'm working on the framing for the bottom shelf. That unpainted 2x4 will be what is supporting the bottom shelf of this workbench. I'm using these 2.5 inch long Spax self-drilling bolts or lag bolts. I chose these because they're a lot thicker diameter than an average screw, and I wanted those to be able to hold the extra weight of the shelf. This shelf is going to hold big lateral filing cabinets that I use to store my tools in, but also a bunch of other tools that are just set there on the shelf. This is another cross brace. This is the nearly 8-foot long one that goes the long dimension of the frame. This one, you see, I am just using pocket hole screws, which isn't the strongest thing, but this will be supported also by the casters directly underneath, as the caster will be mounted to this exact corner, so the weight will be really supported by the caster, as you see here. The casters that I chose to use are the same ones that I've used in my plywood cart video, so if you saw that, you saw these used previously, and I was really happy with how those turned out. They're fairly inexpensive Amazon casters, but they've held up to the weight of all the plywood and the 2x4s I have on that lumber cart, so I'm going to continue to use them as they've performed well. After showing you the quick version of installing the supports for the worktop, here's installing the supports for the shelf that's going to be on the bottom of the workbench. This one I wanted to have a few more supports, so on the ends you see I have supports also going perpendicular. These are all just with pocket hole screws. And then I am cutting the shelf to length. It actually took me a few times of trimming to get it just right. I wanted it to be a nice tight fit. As you see here, it still barely fits in if you push it in just the right angle. Okay, after I finally got that plywood sheet to fit on that lower shelf, the next goal is to attach it permanently to those 2x4 supports. I went to both sides as you just saw me there and marked the location of each of those supports, and now I'm connecting those two marks to mark the center of those supports. This is all in an effort to help me more easily attach it with screws and reduce the chances I have of missing those and having a screw that's absolutely worthless. I like to put a screw on each corner, giving a chance for it to pivot after the first screw, but getting it all squared up and then just repeating the process. As you see me here, I'm doing a lot of the pre-drilling first, and then going through and screwing all the screws down. And finally, it's time to add paint to this part. I was really happy with how the paint turned out. It's one of the first shop projects I've painted, and I think I'm going to do it more often. Okay, now that the paint has dried, I am installing the lateral filing cabinets I had told you I was going to use for my storage drawers. This was a bit of a challenge as they're heavy and hard to move, but I finally got it on there after some frustration and head banging. I actually designed the dimensions of this workbench to fit this one right on the end. I wanted this to hold all my most frequently accessed tools so they're easy for me to grab while I'm working on a project.
Now do I stop?
Alrighty, so there you have it. There's a budget workbench that's 4x8. I really wanted this bigger size because previously I was using like a 3x5 workbench and it worked great for a lot of things, but pretty quickly I found that the things I was trying to build were hanging off the edges, and since I had the room here in the shop, if you follow me on Instagram, you saw that I demoed part of my built-in workbench so I could fit this in here against the wall. But the mobility is really nice, be able to pull it out here in the middle and be able to work on stuff. I want to build some bigger furniture for my kids' rooms, and being 6'6", I'm kind of allergic to working on the ground because it's so far down there that I built this table at 41 inches tall so I could stand up, and as you see my camera can't even see me up here, but it's nice and easy to work here without having to bend over. Because it was pre-COVID wood prices, I think I was in about $150 worth of supplies. Maybe plus or minus a little bit of that after I took into account the paint and things. But I was really happy with how it worked out and excited to show you guys more projects as I build on it. Okay guys, thanks for watching. This is the budget workbench build from Make It Matt. As you'll see, we'll be making more projects soon, and hopefully you come along and see that too. Like and subscribe. Thanks guys.